All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reginald Dumas, and I want to welcome you to the Office of State Procurement Contract Renewals Agency Training. And so this presentation is not as long as some. So if you have any questions during the presentation, just go ahead and type them in the chat. And what we'll do is I'll go through the presentation and we'll make sure we get all the questions answered by the end, either at the end or by the end of the presentation. So like I said, today we'll be talking about contract renewals. So why does OSP use renewal options in their contracts? And there are several reasons for that. One, it helps us lock in prices. And two, it saves time and money not having to bid those commodities out every single year. We can opt not to renew a contract if there are huge increases in prices. And we can also opt to not renew if there are issues with the contractor. So renewal options in the contracts are generally bid out for one-year periods with 2 one-year renewal options, not to exceed 36 months. There are rare exceptions for longer contracts, such as 5-year contracts with, not to, and maybe their renewal options, they might go every 2 years with an option to renew for 2 additional years. But all of these special requirements have to be approved by the Director of Office of State Procurement. And unless the contract has built-in clauses that allows for changes, most contracts will be renewed at the same prices, terms, and conditions as the original contract. So what type of contracts does OSP initiate? There are several different types, and we'll list them here now. First, we have blanket orders. Then we have agency term contracts, which are similar to blanket orders, and I will describe the differences between those two shortly. We have statewide contracts, brand name contracts, Louisiana Multi-Award Schedule contracts, or LAMAS contracts, cooperative contracts, which are like contracts that we do with NASPO, and emergency contingency contracts, and RFP purchasing contracts. The ones we'll focus on are that this renewal process deals with are the following: blanket orders, agency term contracts, emergency contingency contracts, and RFP purchasing contracts. The other types of contracts do get renewed, but the agency is not always involved in that renewal. But the agency will be involved in the renewal of those 4 different types of contracts there. So what is a blanket order? If an agency has a need for a product or service that they know they'll be using throughout the year, instead of doing multiple one-year, one-time buy bids, they may choose to have a blanket order set up instead with those renewal options. And then blanket orders have estimated quantity clauses and are either set up on a delivery schedule or on a call-for as-needed basis. Most of the time, when an agency sets up a blanket order, they have an idea of how much they typically order for each shipment or how much they use per month. But it is not always an exact set amount, and that is the reason why we have the estimated quantities clause. That way we can increase and decrease the amount as needed. So some common examples of blanket orders are uniforms, janitorial services, lawn maintenance, security guards, etc. So a blanket order, as I said before, agency term contracts are similar to blanket orders. In a blanket order, the funds are encumbered. You use the same purchase order number for the entire year. The actual orders can be placed either by phone, fax, or email directly with the vendor. And the renewal is initiated by the agency with submission of a shopping cart to OSP. For agency term contracts, the funds are not encumbered. Multiple PO numbers will be issued against the contract. Each time an order for shipment or payment is needed, a PO has to be entered into LeGov. And the renewal is initiated by the Office of State Procurement analyst who is over that particular agency term contract. They will contact the agency and ask them if they want to renew. We have a question.
Is this what we use for copier paper in most cases?
For copier paper, I believe you're using the statewide office, who are they called?
Veritiv. So for a statewide,
Yeah.
Veritiv is the statewide contract holder for paper. Any POs you're doing for that would come from a statewide contract, not a blanket order.
Right. I didn't know that. Sorry, I didn't know the name of the contract, actually. Thanks, Garrett. Okay, so if the agency does not want to renew a particular contract, but they would like the commodity and service to be rebid, they must provide a reason in writing to the Office of State Procurement. They need to note their file as to why they do not wish to renew. And they need to submit a shopping cart to have the commodity service placed out on bid. One of the important things to remember, if the agency is not wanting to renew because they're having difficulties with the current contractor, there are no guarantees. We will renew it, but there's nothing stopping that vendor from bidding on that service again and being awarded that contract again unless they are debarred from bidding. So just keep that in mind. It's better to sometimes try to work the issues out with the vendor because you may still end up with the same vendor and we'll be going through a bidding process and end up right back where we were. All right, so when the agency does want to renew, they'll be utilizing the renewal options. So approximately 4 months prior to the end of the contract period, the agency needs to send a shopping cart requesting to renew the contract or blanket order. Try not to wait until the last, the whole bidding process and renewal process takes a little while. So so that 4 months prior, try not to go any less than that, because if the vendor decides not to renew or we run across something where we can't renew that contract, it's going to take a little while for us to get that back out on bid, re-awarded. And you may have to go without that service for, a short period of time until it's awarded again. So when you submit the shopping cart to renew, you want to state in the notes that you're requesting to utilize the renewal option and state the PO number that you wish to renew or the contract number that you wish to renew. All right, during the renewal process, and I stated before that contracts are usually renewed at the same prices, terms, and conditions as the original. There can be some changes, so I'm going to go over some of the changes here. Price increases are not allowed at all unless the contract contains a price escalation, de-escalation clause, which is tied to a way of tracking the price change. For example, the consumer price index. Those types of contracts, you will know if those escalation or de-escalation clauses are part of that. Those are unique contracts. Price decreases are allowed. Quantities may be adjusted at the time of renewal, but lines cannot be deleted. Lines cannot be added. You may delete lines from the contract, but you can't add any new lines. And then minor changes that do not change the scope or terms and conditions of the contract, such as updating the agency's contact information, is permissible. Okay, so with the new contract administration program that we're putting out there, this is the biggest change with renewals for the agencies. We now have a contract performance evaluation form that will need to be submitted with your shopping cart to renew, your request to renew. And so I wanted to show that form in here. We're not going to go over it in detail because it will be discussed in another training class, but I just wanted to show you because it is part of the renewal process. So when you're submitting your shopping cart for renewal, you'll now be required to attach one of these forms or submit this form to OSP prior to OSP seeking a renewal with the vendor. And this contract, what it basically is you'll go through and you'll fill out, and like I said, they'll go over it in more detail in another class. But the information that it's asking you for is mainly about the vendor and the contract itself. The information that you provide to us is valuable in the sense of, do we need to revisit this contract? Is the contract working? Is the contract even needed? You may not even be using it. So we may not even need to renew it because, it went unused all year. Are you having problems with the vendor and that kinds of stuff? Okay, so once OSP gets your request to renew, the state procurement analyst assigned to that renewal file, we have a question.
Does this include the rejection from state printing as well?
Does what include the rejection from state printing?
When sending in the renewal?
Okay, so I'll discuss what state print. So with state printing, you have to go to, when you want to do a print job or something like that, you have to go to state printing. State printing decides, or they will let you know if they can do the printing, or they reject the printing and tell you to come to OSP to have the services bid out. That is still going to be required if that is the question that you're asking. I'm not quite sure what, you will still need to provide that delegation back to the agency and OSP to bid those services out, along with this form. So yes, if we're bidding it out, if OSP is bidding it out, regardless of whatever the commodity is, and it's a contract awarded by us, then yes, you will need to fill out that form. The only time you do not need to fill out this form is if it is a blanket order. Blanket orders will not require that form. All other contracts will. I hope that answers the question. Okay, so once we get your request, once we get the agency's request here at OSP, the state procurement analyst assigned that renewal file will pull and examine the original bid file along with all other renewal files to determine if there were any renewal options remaining. Sometimes we get renewal requests from agencies and they've exhausted all the renewals and it needs to go out on bid. We also look for any problems with the original award, such as any kind of protests or rejected bids for some administrative technicalities. We also look for any complaints and deficiencies in the files. So at that point, if at any point during that file process, it is determined that the contract should not be renewed, the SPA will discontinue the renewal process. It will inform the agency that the contract will not be renewed, and the SPA will get the agency's concurrence or acknowledgement in writing to place the items back out on bid. So everything went great. We're moving on with there are no issues with the previous files. There are renewal options. So the SPA will then move on to perform a market analysis. They're required to perform 2 market analyses. One, the CPI, PPI, and that's the Consumer Price Index. And when they're looking at that, they're going to pull that report for the contract commodity category, and they're going to limit that report to 1 year of data. And then they'll also do a snapshot report from Procurement IQ for the commodity code, and I believe that report runs over a 3-year period, that snapshot. If the market analysis shows huge decreases, it may not be in the state's best interest to renew at the same prices. So at that point, the SPA will if it was determined by OSP, they'll route it up, it'll be discussed, and if it was determined that we don't want to renew at those prices, we will contact the agency, let them know, we'll ask the vendor for a decrease in price, and we'll just discuss everything through, and at some point we may decide not to renew and bid it out again for better pricing. So they did their market analysis, then the SPA will then do a renewal inquiry letter to the vendor, except for RFP purchasing contracts, because those contracts are extended through amendments. So the SPA will email the amendment to the contractor for RFP purchasing contracts. All others will get a renewal inquiry letter. We will ask the contractor for a discount. We always ask the contractor for a discount at renewal time. Regardless of if there were price increases, decreases, it doesn't matter. We always ask for a discount. They'll prepare the renewal inquiry letter. They'll include any of those changes if anything changed in that contract, like we deleted a line or we decreased the price or anything like that, all of that must be included in that inquiry letter to the vendor, and then they will email that letter to the vendor. So the vendor is going to get the letter, he's going to review it, he may decide to reject the renewal. He may not want to renew, because we won't increase our prices, and the price has gone up, let's say. So the renewal process will discontinue at that point. The using agency will be notified of the vendor's rejection, and the agency will submit how they wish to proceed in writing to OSP. So you'll be asked, do you want to just let this contract expire and not rebid it, or you want to rebid the commodities? Whatever it is that the agency would like to do, they will supply that in writing to OSP. If the agency wishes to place the commodity service out on bid, the SPA will route the file for approval to place it out on bid. All right, so the vendor gets the letter and he agrees with the letter. He's going to sign the letter. Once the SPA gets the letter back, signed by the vendor stating that they do agree to renew, the SPA will obtain the following documentation if it's applicable to that contract. They will get a current Secretary of State registration, a current SAM.gov report, a current certificate of insurance. They will check the AM Best ratings for those insurance to make sure that it meets the requirements of the contract. They will get signature authority of the person who signed that renewal letter, that they have authority to sign contracts for that company. They'll obtain any licenses and any additional documentation that the contract may require. Sometimes there are like proof of training or things like that. So anything that's required by that contract, the SPA will get and verify before the contract is renewed. With the exception of signature authority, all of that same documentation is required for all distributors listed on a contract, if there are distributors that are listed on the contract. So sometimes these contracts might have 10 distributors. So they have to go and obtain all that information for each and every one of those companies. At that point, everything checks out. We have all the required documentation, and the renewal process is complete. The contract is then executed. The SPA will print it, sign it, scan it with all attachments, and then email the new contract to the contractor and the agency. And that pretty much ends the renewal process. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat. You can contact the Office of State Procurement at the number and that's shown on the screen there, and the two help desks emails. Are there any questions? Well, I appreciate your time. I hope everybody have a great afternoon and stay masked up. Thank you.
Performance form, where do we find it?
The contract performance form will be available, I believe, after all the training and stuff is complete. And that's a better question for the class that there's a class tomorrow that will go over that form in detail, and that'll be a better question for them in that class.
Yes, these presentations will be put on our website.
All right, I think that's it. If you do have any additional questions, please feel free to email the help desk there, and they'll get it to me and I can answer it. All right, thank you.